no lab next week because of Labor Day. I didn't want to get us thrown off as far as days of the week. You guys have already had your optomotility course, and unfortunately that course had no lab. So we're going to use 1 or 2 labs this semester as part of binocular vision to introduce some things about eye movements. And so Dr. Harris, who has agreed to present this clinical instrument called the ReadAlyzer, which analyzes our eye movements while we're reading with comprehension. As a bonus, you guys know I offer extra credit, so we would like to get as many of you to have personal experience with the ReadAlyzer so that you'll have a better understanding of the experience of it, not just, okay, I'm in the back room watching somebody do the ReadAlyzer up here. But Dr. Harris is going to spend the next hour going over the ReadAlyzer, and then my work study student, Jacob Bean, between now and Thanksgiving, will be collecting ReadAlyzer data on those of you who wish to participate in the extra credit. I'm hoping that most, if not all of you, will do so. He's going to have a schedule posted hopefully by the end of the week so that you can log on and sign up to do that data collection. And when you sign up for it, expect to spend 20 to 30 minutes because we have to do it several times to get you comfortable and familiar with what you're doing during the testing. Okay, take away Dr. Harris.
Okay, thank you. Pleasure to have an opportunity to present to you. It'll probably be not quite a year when we're in formal class together in 304 Amblyopia Strabismus. Probably be doing some now guest lectures. I have been a co-lecturer in Leeds for the last 8 years, so Dr. Bodak's doing that on her own, but I think I'll be doing a few fill-in presentations there. So this is probably our first official time together, and it's nice to see all the faces and interest and that kind of thing. Because I've taught PEDS, I've taught VT in the past, I taught the ocular motility for 5 years, 3 years plus overlap with Dr. Schnell putting that together. I do know what was taught in those because a lot of those slides and stuff I actually helped put together. So I'm going to try to integrate a lot of things for you together here in something that's very practical. We have 2 of these units. One is in the clinic. It's used in VT on pretty much every learning-related visual problems case that comes through the VT clinic. So it's important that you have some hands-on clinical practice with this because you will be using it in the clinic. So this is not just something to learn because of this or that or whatever. It's actually a clinical tool that you use. And you'll see a very useful clinical tool as well. We'll talk a little bit about that at the end. So a lot of these slides, why did that jump to like 18 miles? Here we go. A lot of these slides, or a few of these slides you've actually seen before in ocular motility, but I want to refresh some of the concepts as we go directly into using the device. Okay. Eye movement parameters, and we're talking here specifically for reading. We're going to be looking at fixations. Obviously, fixation is when you stop and things are steady, but you know from ocular motility that's only a relatively steady, right? A fixation is when you look at somebody's eyes, they don't appear to be moving, but I think you did learn that even during a fixation, there are micro movements and the system is constantly in motion. And all of those motions have a purpose, right? You learned that if you stabilize an image on a retina, it disappears. The human neurological system only reacts to change. And part of the reason for the constant movement of the oculomotor system is to drive sensory experience so that this internal representation of reality that you have is up to date, okay? So there's purpose for the constant movement. So we're going to be looking at fixations. In the context of reading, we'll be looking at regressions. I have slides on each, so we'll define them there. We're going to be looking at this duration of fixation and what happens during a fixation. There's a lot that actually goes on. And looking at how much time a person spends in that gives us insights into what's happening in their actual reading process. We're going to look at the reading speed. Of course, we get that from this kind of thing. And everything, it's very critical that we do it under the control of comprehension. What do I mean by under the control of comprehension? If I ask somebody here, okay, just throw your eyes over the text, right? And I don't ask you to answer questions, you might use a very different eye movement pattern than you would if you were actually reading for understanding, okay? So, it turns out, by the way, this is a quick aside, turns out there are people that only know one way to throw their eyes over text and don't do multiple different ways. And it actually turns out it is important to have different ways to look at text rather than just what you might think of as the verb read or to read, okay? So at any rate, under the control of comprehension is an absolutely critical thing. Dr. Sissert mentioned when you do volunteer that we often have to do multiple passages. And that's because studies have shown that the first passage you do on somebody, there's all kinds of things going on in their mind, if you will. Oh, and please be thinking, I'm going to want to volunteer. You've sat in the perfect seat. And you were volunteering somebody to sit in even the more perfect seat again and again, hopefully to save yourself. But anyway, and also if there's somebody in this class who is bilingual or does read Spanish, because I have some stories, and I think it's interesting to compare a person, how they do both in English versus Spanish. It's just interesting. I wouldn't ask somebody to do that if they can't read Spanish or that type of thing. But again, everything must be under the control of comprehension. People sometimes will do this, throw their eyes over it, can't answer the question. They go, oh, I guess I really needed to read it. It's like, okay. And then we see, and I think you know what I'm talking about, right? There's times you just sort of skim over something. What was it about? I don't know. You know, like that War and Peace. Yeah, something about Russia. Well, anyway, sorry.
Hey, I read the whole thing.
What's that?
I've read the whole thing.
Yeah. I bowed down. No, okay, fine. At any rate, and then you engage in the actual act of reading, and we see some very different mechanics. So, what happens during a fixation? I'm just going to talk about a few of the things. This is not an exhaustive list of what happens during a fixation. But the first thing you do, I don't know if it's actually the first thing, we aren't in there all plugged in and watching all the processes go on, but we know that we must convert the graphic representation, the written symbols, into, and we would like to think we don't have to do this, but it seems like it happens. If we're doing functional MRIs or functional PET scans and this kind of thing, watching what lights up in what order, we do know that the phonemic and then combining the phonemes, the word cup, up, three separate phonemes put together to make its name cup. We know that that active processing of looking at that, coming up with the sounds, assembling them together, is going on even if you're reading completely silently. You don't make any noise, you don't make any sub-vocalizations. Broca's area, Wernicke's area still light up in terms of reading. There are probably very few people who it doesn't, but for the most part, that's occurring. You're then going to use the lexeme, the name of a word, if you're reading for understanding, and that's why this all has to be under the control of comprehension. You use the name of that word as a key, in a way, to the knowledge you have about what the meaning of that thing is, okay? So it acts as a key. You're then going to integrate that information with what has already been read, okay? How does this new piece I just got fit with what I've already got? And then you're going to use that to anticipate or begin to think about the probability of what's coming next. Now, if you remember from motility, we talked about, or Dr. Schnell talked about, if you're reading a newspaper story about something you already know a lot about, what percentage of the words do you need to fully understand? And the answer is 9%. And I hope that sort of punched you in the face. It's like, how do I know which 9% to pick? That's probably why you have to read so much more, but you only need about 9% in that scenario, right? Because that's about a 5th grade level thing, about a topic you know something about, okay? So we anticipate, think about what's going to come next. You learned about the pre-processing zone in left to right read languages, what's happening off in right visual space. The basic idea was a good reader fixates where? 1/3 the way in from the left-hand side of the word. So how do you know what size saccade to program and execute while you're sitting there reading this word? Well, you have to have a pre-processing area. And in good readers, it's functioning. In poor readers, it isn't. And in poor readers, if it isn't, that leads to a very high percentage of regressions in the actual fixation pattern or scan pattern. Okay, so we look at that. And then you're going to program the next eye movement. All of that happens every 0.24 seconds in a good reader. Okay, in a good reader, that's happening over and over and over again. Now, what's a regression? A lot of this comes from understanding of working with the profession of linguists and people who look at language. But we believe that many regressions, particularly the ones in good readers, I already gave you the reasons for why we see lots of them in immature readers. And I don't mean immature socially or emotionally. I mean immature in terms of their mechanics of reading, okay? If they've not developed the use of the pre-processing zone, we're going to see a lot of regressions. But in a good reader, why do we see regressions? Right? Is the ultimate reader one who never makes a regression? And the answer is maybe, but the problem is in our language, many words have multiple meanings. Okay, and as you're going along, you may first try a meaning of a word, and then you keep going, and then you realize, wait a minute, that meaning, you may not realize this on a conscious basis, but that meaning is not allowing me to integrate what's coming next. Something's wrong. Therefore, I go back to access the stored knowledge about a particular word to bring in another meaning. Now, you remember in the course, the garden path sentence. The horse raced past the barn and fell. Remember that when you first looked at it? It was like, what? You did the little cat thing, right? And you probably went right back to the word raced, just like on the next slide, where it showed the jump back and a much longer duration of fixation at that word. That's a sentence that was constructed by linguists intentionally to trigger regressions in good readers. Good. I hope you understand, okay? So that's what we think is going on. We don't know. We can't actually plug into the stream of consciousness that's going on. But there's a belief in that, and as long as our language, or the language that people are working with, has these ambiguities, certain words have multiple meanings, and maybe you've got to try others, most likely we will always see some degree of regressions in the actual mechanics of reading, okay? Next we have what's called a return sweep, or return sweep complex. Okay, so what's a return sweep? We would go from the end of a line and make a single saccade to the beginning of the next. Okay, that's the ideal, bam, okay? What do we see in an immature reader? Often what we see is they're here, some might go back, 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 drop down. Some might drop down, go back, go back, go back, and then begin. The most popular thing we see, even with some very good readers, is a huge jump that gets most of the way there. Very, very short duration fixation here, and then a correction saccade, and then they start. Okay? So even in good readers, we're going to see some of those. Every one of those approaches wastes time. Waste time slows down reading speed. Slower speed taking data in results in reduced comprehension. Okay? The slower the speed, the worse the comprehension in general. That would be a general insight. Why? You have a particular speed that your intellect can take data in. Your mechanical system of parsing the text may not actually be quick enough to keep your intellect engaged, and therefore some of you may find reading boring, okay, or put you to sleep. It's 10 o'clock in the morning, you've had a wonderful night's sleep, and 15 minutes in, you find yourself dozing a little bit, okay? We know that occurs in quite a number of you, okay? And that's part of why Dr. Sistrick is making the opportunity available for, as a group, for everybody to get tested and find out where you are. I want to be very clear with this. The mechanics of reading has nothing to do with intellect. We're not testing your intelligence, you understand? We're testing the development of the mechanics of how you read, very much like I would look at somebody shooting a free throw in terms of the mechanics. Are the shoulders square? Is the arm coming up right? Do we have a nice fingertip roll? Where are they looking? Do they stay square completely through the shot? You look at the mechanics of things. That has nothing to do with intellect. That has everything to do with simply the development of the mechanics, okay? The way I also think of it is somebody who's reading only 140 or 150 words a minute with poor mechanics, who's here, has to have really good intellect, because you're having to then make up for these mechanical difficulties that simply haven't been learned with raw intelligence, okay? So if we can find those, fix those, you can be a much better you. And I'll tell you, I'm a little evangelical about it because I was one of these cases. I was tested as a young child for reading and learning problems. I used the H word, which is a little strong with reading, and it actually wasn't until my third year of optometry school, which is a weird time to start reading, that I read, okay, I could read, right? I'd broken the code, but it's like I would tell people, tell me or show me, but don't make me read it, okay? But third year optometry school is where I start to read. If you come up to my office, I know you've been there, and some others have, people walk in and go, wow, I'm like in a library. And it's like, yeah, and every one of those books I've read, and every one of those books has underlines or highlights and that kind of thing. And I got to a point where I read incredibly efficiently, and I really only read something once. I don't understand rereading things, but anyway. There's too much out there to read. Who would have time to read something? Anyway, sorry. Okay, I lied. I read the Harry Potter series 3 times. Okay, but that's just fun reading. Why 3 times? Look, when the 7th book hit, right? I was like, no way she previewed all that. And I had to go immediately back, right? And then the movies were coming out, right? And it's like, which one was that? I don't know, because it all sort of blurred together. So anyway, I think you got it. Okay. Good stuff. So that's a return sweep. Next, we look at the average duration of fixation. That was what we looked at initially. What was the average duration? I've already mentioned it should be about 0.24 seconds for a mature adult reader. It's on the slide here. Your first grader's about 0.33. That doesn't look like a lot of change. It's actually profound, even though they're very small increments that change. 0.27 is actually what we expect from a 4th grader to a 9th grader. So it stays about the same. The 9th grader makes longer saccades and takes a bigger visual chunk, and it takes a little longer to process the chunk, and they're spending less time making jumps, so it all averages out. And that's why the 4th grader takes less information, more stops, and it still averages at 0.27. But the key point was, and you'll see in the new displays that we work with, that the average really wasn't a good indicator of things. Again, I think you've had statistics you had over your mini-mester. Now I think Dr. Hayworth did that a little bit on the statistics and this kind of thing. That sometimes a mean or an average messes up the actual insight into the data, and understanding, looking at a standard deviation or looking at a frequency plot would be far more helpful in gaining insight into something if it's highly variable. And what you'll see is the actual fixation, duration of fixation, is highly variable even in a single person, and you'll see it as we actually look at the mechanics. Okay? So this slide, I think you saw, this was actually part of your ocular motility class. This is the raw data recording, and to orient you, time works its way down. When we do the actual live recording here, what you'll see is you start with a blank screen, and these lines will fill the screen, go to the bottom, clear, and then restart, clear, and restart. And that's how we'll see an actual live recording as it's coming in, okay? This little odd complex here where they go doesn't mean the person crossed their eyes incredibly far very quick. It means the person blinked there. And the way these systems record, it can't record through the closed eyelids, okay? So that's what's going on. The next slide shows us the model view of that. So this is the raw data. This is the model view. What does the model do? It straightens out all of the dots in a fixation, okay? And it also adds amplitude. It pushes things further apart. So it takes these little jumps that are occurring in a saccade, and it just adds some width to it. It takes a return sweep, and it says, let's make that our standard size for the display, and then it expands all of those as it does it. So you get a much cleaner thing that's easier, I think, to relate to. And the basic idea here is, again, time goes down here. You can see that this is relatively short as compared to this in terms of the length of the line. The longer the line, the more time. The shorter the line, the less time was spent at that fixation. And I think you can see right away there's quite a variation here in these. This is a return sweep, and this particular segment shows actually no regressions. Here's 3 lines of text read by a good reader, and there are no regressions, okay? Here's a sample of another good reader, but even though this is a good reader, here's a clear example up here of a regression, right? We were fixated here, we jumped back to the left, and then we kept going. And here is a really nice clean return sweep right to the beginning, but here is a return sweep with a little correction, okay? And the duration of this is much shorter in time than here, because it's almost like the periscope went up and said, am I in the right place? Nope. It didn't actually read anything or get any meaning. It just simply said, I'm not in the right place. Oh, there's stuff still to my left? Cool, let's get over there, okay? And that system, that's probably more your M-cell pathway structure system that's just looking at the spatial relationship and said, we didn't get all the way there, okay? Here's a poor reader. That's a single line of text that has about 10 words, and there are 22 separate fixations. I've counted this one quite a few times, okay? So there's 22 separate fixations. You can see the regressions. You can see some of the amount of time. You can have somebody have this mechanics who doesn't understand very well what they read, and somebody who has this mechanics who does. So just because they have these mechanics, you actually still have to take the comprehension test. Okay? And you could imagine a person who takes this long to dissect 10 words and then actually still correctly assembles them, puts them together and comes up with meaning. That takes some pretty good intellect. Okay? All right. This is just an evolution of the different devices. I've used all but 2 of these in clinical practice. I am a partial developer. I have no direct financial interest in these devices, but I'm a co-developer of the Obers, the Visograph 1 and 2, and the ReadAlyzer, and the new wireless version that actually now I'm picking up when I go to Norway next week. I'll be meeting, the programmer is in Sweden, but it's a quick hop, skip, and jump, so he's going to come one of the days that we'll spend together when I'm in Oslo. I've used a lot of these devices. They're all pretty wonderful. Let's talk about the actual ReadAlyzer itself, which is here. I don't need to do a sales pitch because we've got it. So let's look at the inside of the goggle. The way this system and many of our eye movement systems, there are alternate ways that these are measured, but this one specifically is using infrared illumination. And your infrared illumination sources are these, they're two in front of, underneath each eye. The two infrared light sources, and these little black things, I should probably know what if they're diodes or whatever they are, but I don't. But these are the sensors specifically for picking up the amount of infrared light that is reflected back. These devices, or the infrared devices, primarily work as limbal trackers, not Purkinje trackers. Okay, you've learned already about the 4 Purkinje images? Yes. You're bobbing up and down, but are you just bobbing, or are you saying yes? Okay, you're just bobbing. Have you already taught them about the Purkinje?
I don't cover it. I don't have
You don't
time.
cover those, okay.
I thought that was an optics thing, but.
So you don't know, when I say Purkinje images, you don't know what I'm talking about. Okay. You've learned about if we don't coat surfaces, 4% of the light reflects off a surface. Yeah, that part you learned, right? So the first reflection off the front of the cornea is the first Purkinje image. The second is from the rear surface of cornea. The third is from front surface lens. The second from rear surface lens. Okay? When you do, and we'll be talking about these in my class, but I'm sure you already know the term Hirschberg? No?
I haven't lectured yet.
Okay. Yeah, but they're doing cover tests. They must know how to look at the light reflect. Anyway, sorry. We'll get more into this as we get going. Okay.
I don't know that they've done cover tests with a transilluminator, right? What are you using? You're always using your.
Yeah, but when I teach it, you'll see you don't actually need a transilluminator, because if you just look at each other for a moment, don't like peer into their eyes, but look, you'll see a bright reflection in the person's eyes. Right? That's the first Purkinje image of the lights here bouncing off your corneas. Okay? That's the brightest one. Each of the subsequent ones are much less reflective. So you don't actually need a transilluminator later. We're going to go over this in amblyopia and strabismus. I can just look at a person, get a sense of those reflections from, if I know where the lights are, which is the brightest one, are they symmetrical or not symmetrical? And you'll learn how to get that as well. So that while you're doing your case history or you're walking your patient down, if you just look at them when you say hi and greet them, you should already know what their angles are, okay? When you do a cover test, you're only confirming or denying your hypothesis based on what you've already seen. Just as a quickie, okay? That's where we want to get you, all right? Anyway, this is not using that first reflection off the cornea. This is using the reflection off the limbal area, which is a non-linear concave mirror. It's not a nicely polished, gorgeous concave mirror, but you have a flatter surface and a steeper surface coming together, and as that moves, it reflects the infrared light differently, and the differential things between here and here is how they figure out how the eyes have moved. I think it's pretty cool. Okay, this does it 1,200 times a second as well. Okay, yeah. All right. So that's how we get these kinds of recordings. This is a model recording. This is with the data turned on, the analysis engine. This shows how it has classified things. These are return sweeps. You can see that the last number here is the actual length of this line. So when I said these vary a lot, They do. You can see this is 183 milliseconds, 233, 400. So they're not 240, 240, 240, right? They vary considerably as things are going along. We'll get a graph like this. There was a wonderful study done, believe it or not, back 1958 to 1960. That's the last time data was taken on a huge N around the entire United States. Might these have changed? Yep. Should we get new norms? Yep. You want to write a check for about $20 million? Dr. Cicerek and I would gladly go do that study. Take us 5 or 6 years. It'd be a wonderful time to collect a lot of data nationally. Any rate, I don't think people really realize how hard it is to get norms, normative data. But at any rate, that's another whole discussion. So we're going to get the number of fixations, and we'll plot it from grade. These are grades 1 up to adult level performance. And we have very good expecteds on those as well. If we go back here, what you'll see is I had the maker of the device add a frequency plot for the for the duration of fixation. So you'll notice here we have 64 fixations. Those are, by the way, because there's one regression in this one, that's 63 forward fixations and one regression, okay? So it's just the way we talk about it, the total fixations. We don't separate out. Would you mind shutting that door? Thank you. We don't talk about 63 forward fixations and one backward. We talk about the total number of fixations and how many of those go backwards. So when you're writing reports and that kind of stuff, well, reading reports, know how to read those, okay? So this is that frequency plot brought forward. Notice we have the mean and we have a standard deviation. Before therapy versus after therapy, what are we looking for? Typically, before therapy, this number is higher, and we have a wide standard deviation. After therapy, I'm looking for a lower number and a much higher standard deviation in terms of the durations of fixation being more uniform throughout. I had Kurt mark some of these in red. This isn't tall enough to show. The basic idea is anything shorter than 0.2 of a second or 200 milliseconds most likely is not adding to comprehension. And anything longer than 3/4, what you have is generally a person momentarily going offline from taking in current content to talking in their head about it to try to remember something, or to bring some other piece of data online while you're actually doing the reading. So I wanted that marked in red because these are opportunities. If we could eliminate some of these and get rid of these, again, visual efficiency in reading will improve and improve significantly. So here's some demonstration of simulations. This is a good reader. The software will actually allow us to do this, and I'll show you as we get into the actual software. And even in a good reader, you see there are some regressions. This is one with lots of regressions. It is this kind of demonstration that sells people on, oh, I guess there really is a problem. You understand? If you actually see your mechanics laid out like that, okay, could be the same as watching some of the, the golf on TV these days with the super slow-mo of exactly what's happening, whether they get the face of the club square when it finally comes and hits, and then the little red lines with the path as it goes. I just think the technology is amazing in terms of showing us some of these things. This is a person with lots of small chunks to their reading. Yes, there's regressions, but not a ton. At any rate, we'll see some real ones live as we go. Story spacing, just so you know, we have in grades 1, 2, and 3, typically we have these 9-line passages. In the middle 7 lines, there are 50 words. All of the number of fixations or regressions are per 100 words. So with a first, second, or third grade level passage, we take that number and double it. There's 50 words on the middle 7 lines. Grades 4 and higher, we have 12 lines of text. In the middle 10 lines, there are 100 words. So we get the actual number of fixations or regressions. I have a few on purpose that are odd sizes in each one, and it's sort of beyond our explanation right now for why those exist. So when you go through the book, you'll see a 3rd grade story that has this spacing. Don't think it's a mistake, it's done on purpose. And you'll see a 4th and 5th grade story with this sizing as well. Just a couple of them. Okay. I commissioned at one point long stories. We have a number of patients that come to us, but even here at SCO, I've been involved in students that need or want to document extra time on tests. And I did not feel that it was something that we should do based on a single 100-word passage. So these stories are all 800-plus word or 850-plus word stories. They're 2 pages long, and we have comprehension tests on both the first and last page. You've got to get at least 70% on the entire thing for us to feel it's a representative of the person's actual reading mechanics. Okay? All right. And on that one, I can see the first page, second page, an average of both, and it gives me a good sense of, oh, is this person already in the space of 4 minutes fatiguing and getting worse on page 2, or are they actually starting to go faster? I don't know if some of you that are readers, you find you start a book and it's a little slow for the first couple of pages, and then you start really cooking, and then it's really going nice. In my opinion, most of that, because people think, oh, I'm adjusting to, I don't want to get too far afield. I have a book upstairs by Tinker that showed that there's a ton of little things that if you change the physical representation of the text, affects your reading speed. But primarily, I think what it is you're adjusting that pre-processing window to the correct size so that you start efficiently, efficiently making the right size page. And that if the thing you're reading on is just enough different than what the prior thing was, there's that period of adjustment. Okay? All right. I'm going to switch over now to my laptop, and we're going to look at first a case, and then we'll do a live recording. Now, I apologize, this is not a web interface or anything that I could do a Control+ and change the size of the display on the screen. It's just the program being reflected up here, so the print's small, okay? Let me get the first, no, I don't want to do a recording, I want to open prior. So I'm going to tell you a little story about this patient, because I think it will show, and I'm going to show you the actual recordings and these kinds of things as we work through this. This was, still is, maybe not. Okay, they're still really close friends. My son's best friend during high school, who happened to live just across the street as well. They hung out a lot. They were on a robotics team together. Matt, both of his parents are scientists. His mother's mother is a scientist. They were very involved in the robotics team. Matt was hands-on gadget guy. He'd build anything, do anything, program stuff and do that kind of thing on the robot. And the two of them were just thick as thieves all through high school. And I think you realize the expert in something could never possibly be my son's, best friend's dad or the guy across the street. So it took them sort of forever to even open up the idea that Matt wasn't a very good reader, okay? But I knew the kid was brilliant, okay? Because I could just see what they were up to. They would do LAN parties. Anybody here know what a LAN party is? Okay. They'd bring all their computers. I'd close my office at Saturday at noon. All these geeks would bring their computers, wire them up together, okay, all throughout my office, projection screen, and they'd play all kinds of, group-based multiplayer games. It was fun, and we stayed overnight. And anyway, it was a wonderful time. So, and it was nice that they wanted me to share. It's like I thought in the beginning I had to hide in a room. It was like, Dad, you can. Okay, anyway, so it was a good time. It was a good time. But you get an idea of the geekdom that I. Anyway, sorry. Yeah, I'm one of those too. Anyway, sorry. Pocket protectors. It's clear, but anyway, sorry. Stop ruining shirts, but it's good. Sorry, just having a good time. So finally, they brought Matt in to me, and I did 3 recordings on this day, and this is what I had. He was an 11th grader at the time, and essentially he was reading 181 words a minute with comprehension, grade 5.7. This is the mechanics. You can see 125 fixations per 100 words. That's somewhere between 5th and 6th grade. 23 of those were regressions, 7th grade. His average duration of fixation was 0.26, 0.24 is only what I'm looking for. So very fast, but lots of stops, okay? If we look at, I'll put both the model and the original. I mean, you can see, and I'll show you the replay here. This is line 2 of the text, and it shows me he made 17 fixations on those 10 words. Okay, lots of variation, lots of forward and backward chunking, moving through this thing. Let me just show you the simulation. You get an idea? So what do we do for him? Can I fix this with glasses? No. This is vision therapy is what we did. So came in, started vision therapy. The date on this file is, I think it's May of that year. Would go out to the table. Yeah, May 15th, 2006. So this is 12 years ago. Now, my therapists, we're just starting therapy, and in late July, 2.5 months after, they do a recording, and they come to me and say, wow, he's made a whole lot of progress. I'm like, no way. Schedule him back with me. Okay. Maybe he's too smart, he's working the system, I don't know what's going on. It's funny, my son, when he was really young, thought these devices, I could read his mind. I didn't disavow him of that. So let me go to the one that I did. That was in August. Yeah, no, that's the file. Here we are. August 17. The recording cycle. There we go. And I was just absolutely blown away. This is only 3 months later. We still had more VT to do to solidify all of our gains, but 125 down to 63, 25 down to 2. right? The 0.26 came down to 0.25, still not quite where I wanted. His reading speed was 371 now. And it stayed there. He graduated from high school, went to Drexel University in Philadelphia in the engineering program, went on, he now has his PhD. He studied in Switzerland. They have a home in Switzerland also. The grandmother does, the one who's the scientist, okay? Got his PhD there. He's now works based out of Baltimore, but travels all over the place, troubleshooting in certain manufacturing situations, using both his mechanical and electrical engineering knowledge. And it's just neat. I still, when I go back to Baltimore, we run into them, and it's fantastic. And this is the kind of thing that can actually happen. So I think it's time. Did you actually volunteer? I'll do it. Okay. You can say no if you're. Okay, good. Come on up here and type your stuff in there. Let's not roll over the wire. We don't want the wire all over the wire. Just erase it, that's okay. I don't need it.
Oh,
Okay, that's cool. All right, so when we put the goggles on, I have this pretty much open. What's that?
Why am I nervous?
Everybody would be nervous because you're doing it in front of your peers. So, okay, it's totally normal. Okay. Here, hold that on for me at the front. And what we do is come up and over. There we go. And then tighten here, look at me. Now I'm usually going to pull this out and adjust it, and it has these vertical lines. I put them, there's a manual that we have by the device, and we put these vertical white lines here, just look at him so you can see. But I put them so that they go through the outer edge of the pupil. Most people show us more of their limbal area temporally, and I found that not putting them right through the center of the pupils actually gets me a better recording. Okay? All right. So, let me get this all set up. What you're going to do is read this to yourself just one time, okay? Swing around. Get yourself in position. 95% of poor recordings, and what I mean is recordings that won't analyze, are because the device is completely self-calibrating and you don't give it enough time to calibrate, okay? I get students or residents, Dr. Harris, I can't get a good recording, and I come down and do one and it's a perfect recording. And they're not accounting for the person swiveling in the chair, looking up at the last minute, should I read it to myself? And then walk back down, kind of thing. Or you go, and then they go, okay, and readjust, okay? I've seen it all, okay? So anyway, you laugh, but it's funny there. So just look at the O for me. Don't start reading until I say go.
Good luck.
All right, everybody be quiet. We're looking at the O. And begin. And those are the movements coming in real time. Just look up when you're done. If you're too nervous, I won't ask you the question. Are you up for the question?
No, I'll try it.
Okay.
I feel like I was just moving my eyes a little.
But now you understand what I mean, is that like, everybody watching me. I'm just gonna, here's some nice eye movements. Ba-da-boom, ba-da-boom, ba-da-boom. What did I read? Oh, we'll try it, okay? All right. By
Does
the way,
everyone get my score after?
yeah, so if you like, I can just, yes, there you go. Let me share with you, one of the hard parts of this too is asking the questions in a completely neutral way. I learned a long time ago I shouldn't play poker, and people can read my face, so I don't look at them as I read this. And I also try to be pretty much a dead person when I read this. You know, because, right, you can go da 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 da, yeah, da 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 da, and they go no. Do you understand just with your cadence? Okay, so you have to be really careful not to read and give the answer in how you read the question. Okay? So, yes or no, Europeans were the first people to discover peanuts.
No.
Peanuts were first grown in South America.
Oh my god. Yes. that one is yes. 3 is yes.
Okay, should I just let you read it?
I'm gonna say no. 4.
Right, do help from a friend.
I'm gonna get like a 20%.
Don't worry about it.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I mean no. That's yes. Can I go back and say number 2 was no? And I'm gonna say no. Oh my gosh, I don't even know. Yeah, no.
Now, usually I ask, but I don't need to here, the person, how do you think you did, okay? Because where that goes is if I don't get 70%, I then would ask the person, and we won't have to do this, it's okay. Should we go with the same level, or do I need to go, you know, easier in terms of level of the story? All right, in the end, 70%. All right.
Oh, and I also changed 2 of them, so I feel like I should. Really, it might be.
Okay. All right. So we realized this was not, you know, a perfect science here, but what we see is 103 fixations, very few regressions, okay? Most likely you went offline. We'll see some where you talk to yourself, because that's slow, okay, 0.28. So 203 words a minute. Let me share with you that Dr. Sistrick and I did 1 full year of students here. At one point we got 235, okay? Please know we always throw out the first, we would do a second, and you know, either you'd really go and slow way down because you really engage in it and not to try to show off fancy eye movement. Not that you did that, but I think you understand what I mean, is to really make sure you get the 70% on a second story. You engage more and the speed actually goes down. Or you go, oh, okay, I can, and then you kick it up a notch and see, can I still get the 70 by running that way, okay? But again, the reading speed is down. What should you guys be at? 280 to 300. The school, the year here we did average 235. There were people at 140, 135, 150. Those were incredible opportunities to help those people, and quite a few did either come to me, go get testing done, get a vision therapy evaluation. Quite a few got through vision therapy, and then got the benefits of, for the rest of your career, being able to read much, much faster. Okay? How are we doing time-wise? One more? One different person?
Anybody speak Spanish or read Spanish?
Yeah, I'm not sure we have time to do both, but no Spanishers here? Okay. Okay.
Anybody have questions? Dr.
Yeah.
Harris, tell us about the practice application
Yeah,
and cost and that sort of
Dr.
thing.
Sisrick usually asks these nice, wonderful questions at the end. So the cost of the device now, the newer version, not this one, because this one isn't made anymore, will run just under about $6,000. That probably punches you in the face and you're like, ah! But you're not yet into the economics of understanding that a basic learning-related visual problems case will bring in between $4,500 and $5,000 now to a practice. If you're using this as a deal closer, right, because it demonstrates to the parents and to the person what's actually going on, if you think of it, you only need it to help you close one case pretty much to pay for the device, but it's really gravy. In terms of, a lot of people are finding without it, 3 out of 10, 4 out of 10 learning-related visual problems cases are buying VT, but with it, 6 to 7 out of every 10 are buying it. Do you understand? It's a sales tool. It's a wonderful before and after demonstration tool. It's a wonderful research device, but in private practice, we use it primarily for that. Is there a code for it in terms of billing? Most of us just incorporate it into our general testing. There is a sensory motor evaluation code. Some of us, myself, I chose not to overuse that kind of code for a particular device, but you could do that. I use this mostly as part of my total evaluation. I did have some patients or people that would come in who, I want a letter to get more time on the SATs, or I want more time on, etc. And I would just do a series of these plus the long stories to write the letter for there. And so far, based on this, like, because a person's got a convergence insufficiency, that's not a reason to have more time on a test. You actually need to demonstrate that their actual ability to read under time conditions for comprehension is compromised. So that's really what this device is good for. Okay, other questions?
No, but do you have time to show the nystagmus?
Yeah, let me see if I can find.
We didn't get to show this yesterday, I thought we'd just throw it up there.
Yeah, I've got to
So y'all know what
remember
this
his name. It's a D, here it is. Huzefa. I think these are mine. Yes, there was no text for these. Well, show me. Show me. Oh, wow. Excuse me. There we go. I know it's hard to see. What I typically did, so in ocular motility, you learn this wonderful list of all the different kinds of nystagmus, right? And this kind is in this part, and this kind in this part, and this kind. And I hate to call like red flag, foul. We have to teach that. That's in the syllabus. That's in the books. That's in the. But when you finally have a device like this that you strap on somebody and say, all right, look here for 30 seconds. And what I would typically do is then go to one side for 30 seconds, back to center, over here, back here, up. So I would do 9 points of gaze, getting 30 seconds in each one. And you begin to look at both the pattern. You can see, oops, as I slide down here, that I had the person move to the right, right? Here's a movement to the right, both, and the amplitude picks up. The frequency, if I print this out and I count, and you put time on this side, I think I can do that. View. I have to print it out and then mark it, okay, where it is. When you do the printout, the time scale comes. But if you count, I get a different frequency, I get a different amplitude in different directions, and with many of the patients who have nystagmus, I even see a different pattern right? A sawtooth will turn into a seesaw, right? Or in different directions of gaze, even the direction of the sawtooth will change, okay? So once you record some of these things, you realize that how things are being taught sometimes in this black and white, this is the way it is, that's in your textbooks, was a nice convenient way, but when you actually see what people really do, you realize, and then we talk about this thing called a null point. Sorry, what a stupid word. It's just a reduced point, right? It doesn't stop, it's just the lowest amount of nystagmus. Why do you use a word that says 0? Sorry, there's certain things that drive me nuts about our use of language, and the terminology is just flat out wrong. It's not anybody at the school here that did it, it's a whole field, right? But null means 0 if you look it up. And there is a place usually where it's reduced nystagmus. And you find people preferentially going to that, right? So if I had one that was often left fixation, I was looking at Dr. Cicerek, I typically turn my face to the right. By the way, there's a completely false logic that says, well, then I should put yoked prisms on the person, right? So, oh, I don't want them to get a neck ache, so if I put a yolk prism that makes them go like this, it'll all work out. It's like, no, the null point is still with them looking to their left. It's a physical thing, okay? So yolk prism wouldn't change it at all. But there's still people in our field that do some of these things. So recording these gives you a real sense of these. You go to different directions, look at it. I actually had an earlier version of this device that had biofeedback attached to it, and that's what we hope the newer ones. So that, and I worked with this person, who's that from, who he actually came to me from India. He didn't fly to me from India, he immigrated from India. But had nystagmus, had best corrected acuity of about 20/70, and wanted to drive. Well, you couldn't in the state of Maryland until you got better acuity. We did biofeedback work, other types of work, monitored with this, and we were able to get it so that he could learn to control the nystagmus, okay, because of biofeedback, right? He would hear this going, ring, 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 ring. You take the output of this and put it to a sound generator. Analog to digital thing, put sound, and now you take something that he has no awareness of because he has no oscillopsia, right? The world is steady. It's not an acquired nystagmus, okay? He hears it, and it's like, okay, what do you have to do to make it worse? And can you learn to look soft, look easy, right? And then he would learn how to minimize the sound, okay? Drive it and let go, drive it and let go. And he was able to get 20/40 pretty consistently best corrected. So he did finally learn to drive and drive very successfully and safely, which was a big, a big change in his life. So anyway, there's some nystagmus.